If you are an unschooling family, then you know the challenge of doing this very unconventional path where you are trusting that your children can be completely led by their curiosity, by their inner guidance, and still turn out okay and still have everything they need to be prepared for the rest of their lives. Now, if that's you, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to talk about how the nature spirits taught me to trust the process. I hope you enjoy it. What's the connection for me between nature spirits and unschooling? Well, first, let me tell you that when I first started unschooling, now I am the parent of two teen unschoolers, one of whom has graduated and is now in community college, and the other has chosen to go to our local public school after years of being completely unschooled. I often, joke that my kids kind of walked off the street, walked out of play and into school, and they thrived. They are thriving as teen unschoolers who went from this very unschooled, self directed life into a traditional academic route. The question that I had while I was unschooling was always, are they going to be okay? Am I ruining my kids? Like, that was a fear. When the voice of fear would come in, it would say, am I ruining my kids? Like, is it okay that we're doing this completely unconventional path where we're not following a traditional curriculum, where I'm really letting them get in contact with their own curiosity and trusting and protecting their will? That to me was very important. I wanted them to know the difference between their yes and their no. They know this is something I want and this is something I don't want. So this inner knowledge, self-knowledge, was very important to me to support that in my children. I was a classroom teacher, and I will tell you, I loved my teaching years. Even though I was a classroom teacher and then I became an unschooling mom, that path actually is connected to the reason why I chose unschooling, because I was in mainstream education and I could really see the ways in which it was limiting. And I did not want the foundation for my child's education to be something that started limiting them right away. I'll talk about that in other videos, but for this video, I want to talk about something that is like probably strange to most people. There are not many people who are going to talk about the relationship between nature spirits and unschooling. But again, remember the context here. Part of what I'm struggling with is this question of, can I trust that they're going to be okay? And now I did have a secret. What is the word for this? Like, there's an expression like the ace in the hole. Is that an expression? But, I just knew that I was going to come out ahead. I had complete confidence that they could always access any information they needed. And that's the work that I do. My name is Aita Bay, and I teach people how to access their intuition in education for teaching and learning. I made a discovery, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. But first, I want to talk to you about nature beings. So, nature beings and unseen beings, every indigenous culture all over the world knows about nature beings. And just like the ecosystem of each different region of the world is different, the beings that live in each different region of the world, they are also different. They are as diverse, right? There are ocean nature beings. There are nature beings that live in the desert or live in the tropics or live in the Arctic or live in Australia or the Americas, etc. So I just clarified for you some names that you may or may not be familiar with, but I wanted to give you a taste of how different cultures, different indigenous cultures have understood the realm of the nature beings, the realm of the unseen beings. So in the Celtic culture, there's the she, spelled Sidhe, but pronounced she. And this includes the realm of the fairies. That's a word that we all know. And um, I I want to start off by talking about the fairies because the fairies, we moved from an indigenous way of seeing, an indigenous perception that knew the realm of the she, that knew the realm of the fairies, that connected with nature spirits as a matter of fact, right? Meaning an ordinary, an understood part of reality. So we've gone from an indigenous culture in which that was the case into a contemporary and literate culture in which we took fairies and made them into fairy tales. So we turned them into stories, imagination, right? And so this is I'm naming this because this is really part of the shift that was made from indigenous culture to the literate culture. And part of what we get to reawaken is to remember how to reconnect with nature and the nature beings. You can see this is a picture I found. It's an elf and a fairy. The elf and the fairy, they're part of fairy tale world now. They're not considered to be reality, at least by most of us in the educated, the so-called educated world. There's also a mushroom there because one of the aspects of being able to see these beings often included a hallucinogenic journey. So the use of plant medicine that allows you to open your perception and see the beings. Now, I'm not talking about using plant medicine for your education. This is not about that. I'm just giving you some context for how we culturally over time have been able to perceive the nature beings. In Iceland, there's the Huldal folk, uh, which means the hidden people. In the Dagara, which is an indigenous African tradition, there's the word Kantambli, and that Kantambli are known in other African traditions as well. In the indigenous Taino tradition, of which my own ancestors come from, so on one side, they knew the realm of the Semi, which is the spirit realm or the ancestral realm, but it's also the nature realm. And then in the Australian Aboriginal understanding, there's the dreamtime world. And the dreamtime, which actually represents a world that is the more expanded, again, beyond the physical human five senses world. Now, one of my favorite discoveries was the stories of R. Ogilvy Crombie. And I learned about him because I was reading books about Findhorn. Now, if you don't know Findhorn, Findhorn is a spiritual and ecological eco-village, one of the first really well-known eco-villages, and it's in Scotland. The founders of Findhorn were really connected with the natural world and the beings of the natural world, including the nature beings. Ogilvy Crombie was one of those persons who was involved. He was a very special person because he was himself, since childhood, very connected to the unseen realm. Many children are actually open to that realm, but very few of us as adults, certainly in this current culture, are able to maintain that connection. And he was able to maintain that connection throughout his life. He tells this wonderful story, and this was really a story that influenced me, and it's the story of Kermos the fawn. He tells the story of being in the wood, actually being in a park. It wasn't too far away from human activity. And he's sitting against a tree, and he sees in front of him a nature being, and specifically a fawn, which you can see here is an image that we think of as a mythical image of the fawn who is a half man, half animal playing the flute. So Rock is sitting against a tree. The fawn goes up to him and looks at him and comes really close to him because the elemental beings are usually unseen by the humans. And so he was very curious about this man, and he went up to the man, and then Rock said hello. The fawn was surprised, and they start this conversation between the two of them. And finally, the fawn says, "Well, I want to see your dwelling. Where do you live?" And so Rock says, okay, I'll show you where I live. And they walk through the town up to Rock's flat. And when they get into his apartment, the fawn sees these bookshelves. Rock's flat is lined with books. And the fawn says, what are these things? And why do you have so many of them? And so Rock gives an explanation. You can see here, they contain all these facts and stories and theories and accounts of the past and inventions, and they were all written down and put into print and made into books so that way we could have them and that information could be shared with others. But the fawn said, but why? Why do you need these things? Because you can have knowledge, all the knowledge you want, simply by wanting it. Now, what I didn't tell you is that this particular story came to me at a time in my life when I was exploring the practice of family constellations. I had just left my career as a teacher, as a classroom teacher. But I left that job in part because I had reached a place where I realized there are problems that could not be solved in the context of the system. I have an ebook on my website. You're welcome to download that ebook if you want to hear more about that story. But after leaving teaching, I ended up following the path that would become my path. The path has led me to really some of the most meaningful transformations in my life, and including the work that I do now, which is to teach people how to tap into their own heart's knowing as a way to make sense of the world. In other words, I teach people how to get all the knowledge they want simply by wanting it. I might skip past these two sections here and talk to you a little bit about my discovery of family constellations. So in 2011, which is a while ago now, I discovered family constellations, and it just changed my world. I was a teacher, and for various reasons in my life, one of them is that I was teaching systems thinking in the classroom, and I loved teaching systems thinking. I was also bringing mindfulness into the classroom. This was way before people brought mindfulness into the classroom. And then I was told about this practice called family constellations. And one of the things to know about family constellations is that a person will bring a problem, an issue that they're having, and they will choose people to represent the parts of that issue. So if I'm having an issue with my mother, then I would choose a person to represent me and a person to represent my mother. And what happens always amazes me to this day, and I've been doing this for, 14 years at the time of this recording. What happens is those people who are representing, they perceive in their bodies, with their senses, with their intuition, they perceive with incredible precision exactly what's happening in the issues that we set up. And I've seen it now time and time again. Family constellations facilitators around the world do it thousands of times every day, and it always works. If you haven't experienced that, check it out and you'll see what I mean. So in 2011, I discovered this work, and I was in a big transition in my life because I was moving from teaching and could feel that it was time for something new. And I found my way to something new through family constellations because my question became, if this is possible, what else is possible? In other words, if it's possible for me to have people stand up in a room, which is what you see here, and represent different parts of the system and know the information in the system, what else is possible? I had never been told as a teacher that we can access information directly, just like Kermos the Faun said. Why do you have books? When you can access all the knowledge you want simply by wanting it. I have spent the past 14 years answering that question, and that's what I teach right now. What would education look like instead of this to something like this? And this is an example of me early on. It's 13 years ago, maybe, but it's a while ago when I was first starting to facilitate. And you can see me choosing people to represent different parts of the system. So that's one way the process can look like. So when Kermo Stefan says you can know information just by wanting it, we decide as a group what questions we're going to look at and what the field, meaning what's the parts of the system. And then we start stepping in to that field. What else can it look like? Well, here's an example of a young person using a field map with objects. So they took a whole bunch of objects, they listened to a story, and they created a picture of the story using objects. And then they were able to talk back to the facilitator about what they understand about the story and what happens if you only did this. If you're a parent or teacher and you just want to try something out, I recommend creating little maps of your stories. And you will see immediately that you have so much more information about that story than you thought you did. And that's what you see happening here. This young person all of a sudden is starting to reveal dimensions of the story that were not obvious just by listening to the words or reading the words. And the other thing that happens is that it allows you to start to have original ideas. If you are doing some reading and you have to write something up, original thoughts about what you've read, this is an excellent way to be able to get that information. Here's two other examples using objects of mapping the field using objects. Here's another example of how you can learn more. So please subscribe and like so you can become a sense thinker too, and you can learn more exactly how to do this work. Here's another example, inner image mapping. In this case, this young person is drawing out how she understands the text that she just read. And then here's another one. This is called the empathy map. In this case, we create a map on the floor, and then you actually stand on the parts and feel with your body using an embodied listening sense thinking practice to perceive that information. In the next video, I'm going to tell you about my very first time using this practice with my children and what it taught me.